share.
Well, okay, reporting in progress. Abby's here. I will let him in and I will share. And we're starting with 4.
Perfect. Okay, let me open it up on my end here. Or I guess I can pull out a copy. So Article 4, obviously, it's been a while. We've been back and forth on it a lot. So the first thing that you're going to notice change is just both for the letter of offer and the letter of appointment. I've added an explicit clause for the definition of what those are. We can talk about what we did for that definition, but we wanted to make it very explicit what these were and how they differed from each other. And we thought a definition was kind of the clearest way to go about that process. So for the letter of offer, it's sent to all prospective employees as part of the recruitment process. It is a formal document that outlines the terms and conditions of employment for a selected job candidate. So this is, it's sent out to people. It is not binding in terms of funding and things like that. It is what is initially sent out to all of these things. It can go through the total package, but it's not binding for those sort of things. And then the letter of appointment is the formal document that follows any reappointment notice or your initial letter of offer. And this gives clarification about the specifics of your appointment. Hey. So this goes more into detail about what your duties are, your rate of pay, those sort of things. And we've added a couple of clauses later down. This is what we referenced in the other article. We thought it fit best for the letter of appointment to have the description of the required duties broken down by FTE in terms of, and then your annual rate of pay, your term payout, and your biweekly rate of pay, just so it's very clear. We also have a note here on line 44. No salary shall be paid in absence of a letter of appointment signed by a representative of the university and the appointee properly on file with the university. So that's CCL, and we left it in there for right now. But we are interested in kind of redefining this kind of process when it comes to the reappointment notice and then your letter of appointment. We would like the reappointment notice to be served as that formal document that international GAs have to give in to say you are being reappointed. It's bare bones. It doesn't have much more than that. And then the letter of appointment has more details specifically for the GA. And that one is just kind of giving them more clarification on their job duty. So right now there's kind of this kind of flux on where the reappointment notice kind of lies in, and we want it to lie as a separate document that serves as that formal notification that international GAs can then turn in to say, hey, I am employed the next year. Can we renew my my status without departments having to worry about adding in the duties and all that stuff until they give the letter of appointment. Just adds more detail to it, if that makes sense. I'll keep going here, but so the reappointment notice, we've added that definition of or I guess in 4.5, I've just reworked that sentence. So upon request, employees will be given clarification of these criteria from the supervisors. So I rewrote it so it was more clear for our sake here. It was before it was employees can request clarification. It's the same thing, I believe, but it's just for me it seemed a little bit more clear. And then reappointment notice, we're defining that as a separate document and notifies GAs whether there are continuations or non-continuations of their employment. And it is followed by a letter of appointment as in 4.2. The reappointment notice, we would like to serve as that official document kept on file to say they have been reappointed without all the bells and whistles. And then we've added what should be salary, the dates, and your supervisor. And then in part E, we have the beginning of this this non-renewal. So this was in our previous proposal, but it is continued here. So just outlining the notice they should have. And this goes back into 4.9B1, which we'll get into, but it kind of is just following that sort of timeline that we're going to set up, which I think technically should be 4.8B1, not 4.9B1. My mistake. So changes in appointment. Um,
Can we pause for?
Yeah,
And
of course.
ask a couple questions, all right, so I just wanna make sure we understand it at a high level. So. Employment cycle of a GA would be letter of offer.
Hmm.
Letter of appointment. And then every subsequent notice would be a letter of reappointment, or is the intention that they get both a notice of reappointment and also a letter of appointment repeatedly?
They would get both, where the notice of appointment, this reappointment notice would serve as sort of the legal document where it doesn't have much information, but fulfills any requirements that the grad school has to say, you know, for international GAs, you have to turn this in and say, let's renew your visa, let's get everything squared away legally. And then the appointment notice would then add those details for the GA, so they have more details on, you know, what their duties are going to be for their next appointment, their length, any special conditions they have that aren't, you know, legally required for GAs to turn in, but just to add those details for themselves to make sure they're doing their job properly.
Can I try to give an example
Yeah,
that might
of
help?
course.
So like I'm a 9-month TA. I'm a grad instructor, but I'm a TA, right? So I would get my letter of offer when I start. Then I would get a letter of, I guess it would be reappointment technically, that says, hey, you're gonna be here for 9 months, right? So that sets out the entire course of the year for me, right? And then each semester I'd get a letter of appointment, which has my duties. So right now, I don't get a reappointment letter that says, hey, you're here for the next 9 months. I get a semesterly letter of appointment that says, here's your class. Even though I'm a 9-month TA, I only sign something that says, this is my 1 semester. Does that make sense? So we're trying to split out the like 9-month or 12-month part from the semesterly details.
I think we've done in our college with the annual letter and then an addendum if it like changes from fall to spring. So there's probably variation across college. I'm looking at Roberts. I don't know, is that common or is that uncommon?
I think what you described is pretty common.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just trying to make it explicit on the process here to make sure that everyone knows, like, if, you know, someone needs to prove that they have been reappointed, they are getting a formal reappointment notice that they can turn in when necessary. And the letter of appointment is something separate that just adds more details and it benefits the GA. It's not sort of anything, you know, legally speaking, it just adds their details so GAs can perform their job most effectively.
Can we dig in a little bit more on the proposal with respect to letter of appointment then? So
Yeah.
Starting on line 37, I guess technically line 35. What's the time, I mean, 10 days after the appointees demonstrate that they've met all conditions necessary for the appointment, wouldn't most of those conditions already been satisfied?
Well, see, this is something that you and I talked during like conversations
Yeah.
with Zoe about grievance.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that that was only relevant to the first time that you get a letter of appointment, right? That's the only time you are proving that you're having like all of these.
Right, it's when you're in pre-employment,
Right.
basically you're in onboarding.
Right, so that means that there's only a timeline to receive a letter of appointment that first time
Right.
and nothing else. And we understand that if we are saying that the letter of appointment has to have the specifics of like who's TAing for whom and that sort of thing, that sometimes happens like very late. That, you know, it should be given as soon as practicable, right? That's the
Yeah.
wording that we have, but that's very different from what needs to happen for the letter of reappointment because of the I-20 renewals and stuff like that, right? That it does have to have a very specific guideline so that people can renew their visas if they have to.
Yeah, and they can get that report notice before the department has figured out, here's your specific class you're teaching and those things that
Mhm.
might happen later, to make sure that there are no timeline constraints on them. And then they can give out the next letter of appointment once they get those things figured out as soon as practicable. Obviously, some of the language we've left in there, lines 44 and 45, if we go for this switch up, that would have to be moved down to that reappointment notice. And we have in here, we wanted to have this conversation that is sort of what we would like to see happen to make sure it's very clear between this switch up. And things like in line 40 and 41, those would probably have to be modified to make sure that the timelines are set up properly. But we're open to that conversation for sure.
All right, thank you.
So if we move down to 4.8 here, we have some stuff on the changes in appointment. This is, obviously a lot of changes from CCL, but, if we go down to line 120, we've just added the word or deny reappointment. So it's kind of just, we had separate clauses in for reappointment versus, termination of appointment. We've kind of just put them together here to save some space because there's a lot of repeated text. And so what we're kind of outlining here is that, if a GA is failing to perform duties, and they are not subject, or they are being, threatened with non-renewal, they're being informed 90 days prior to their, appointment being terminated. This matches the 90-day renewal, appointment that we have in, 4.6, I believe. Yeah, so 4.6 for a 12-month employee, you have to be told 90 days ahead of time that you're going to be reappointed. So this matches that timeline at 90 days. And then back up into 97, they would be then told if they are actually getting renewed or non-renewed based off of these performance factors, at least 45 days following that notification. And that has to happen at least 45 days before the end of their appointment. So there's like kind of a 15-day window where they would have.
I missed something.
Yeah.
In that transition. Could you go over that again, please, Austin?
Yeah, so 90 days before the end of an appointment, departments, we've tried to line these up. So departments will be responsible for telling GAs either you are being reappointed, which is CCL,
Right.
or you're being told, hey, we're thinking about not reappointing you based off of like continued failure to perform. That's the same timeline, has to happen 90 days before the end of your current appointment, right? You have to be told that far in advance. And then following that, this is giving employees the opportunity to improve essentially before their contract would end. So you're being told 90 days ahead of time, hey, we're thinking about not renewing you. And then after at least 45 days have passed, you are then can be told as in line 97, that, hey, we actually are going to renew you, or hey, you didn't improve enough, we're not going to renew you for that next appointment. But that final determination, that has to still happen before the end of, that still has to happen, 30 days for a 12-month employee before the end of your current appointment.
But wouldn't that lock in the only, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it seems like if you were to structure it that way, the only time period that you could be assigned improvement would be the penultimate 45 days of your appointment, if both conditions would have to be met.
No, so this is following you're kind of given this warning saying, hey, we're thinking about not reappointing you. And
Right.
after 45 days have passed, then you're given the final determination of the department, essentially for renewal, non-renewal. That first 45 days is for any improvements to take place. So they can give you a PIP, they can give you your written performance evaluation to say this is what you're deficient on, and you have 45 days to make those improvements.
No, I got that. I guess what I'm saying is, what if that decision is made before the penultimate 45 days and that decision is made in like the middle of February? Do they still have to wait?
No, it has to be at least 45 days before the end.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
That's not the way I read it. That's why I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that I understand how that kind of fits together. Okay.
Yeah, so that final, or the final determination on renewal has to be 45 days after notification and at least 30 days prior to the end of your appointment.
Okay. Thank
So,
you.
yeah,
Thank you.
so we're trying not to add more timelines ahead of time. We're trying to keep to that 90-day standard that we already have for renewal. And then we're just adding, if you are not being renewed, there's this extra step of being kind of warned, given time to try to improve. And the department has a timeline to try to give you that final notification, essentially. We're continuing going through here. So we do say, we've made it so instead of being forced to go on a PIP or anything like that, we've made it sort of this optional thing. So they will be given the opportunity for a PIP, but it's up to the employee to decide if they want to go on that or not. But they will be given the written performance evaluation saying this is what you're deficient on at the very least. Then if we move down, in the cases of lack of funds, we had 3 weeks notice before. We still would like the 30-day notice on that as much as possible. And then we still have the same things for the attempt to put them into a similar appointment for the duration of the term that you already have. And then we have pretty much the same language we've had before, except for this idea of severance payments. We've gone from 20 to 10 weeks to kind of have like a further discussion on that. So hopefully that does make sense there. It's a lot of small things, but hopefully they add up to some comprehensive change and improvements to how the system is done in terms of reappointment.
So I think probably the first, and obviously appreciate you going through all this. Obviously, we've gone back and forth on 4 a lot.
Yeah,
I guess one of my initial takeaways in reading it is I feel like the intention, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels as if with the elimination of the provision on, I'm on the change document.
yes.
The elimination of old 4.5 on lines 86 and 87.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about though, yeah.
And the insertion of the phrase in the new document on line 120 or deny reappointment.
Mhm.
It appears to eliminate the ability to non-renew apart from the explicit cause reasons outlined in 4.8.
Yes, and I think we've made that clear. That's something we're interested in. We're trying to make this a fair process to make sure that we have valid reasons for non-appointment. And we're happy to have a further discussion on how that may work. But we made that clear in our last proposal that we're interested in trying to combine these things to make sure that people are not denied reappointment for no reason, that there's a reason given, and those reasons are within this list and they can be expected. And yeah, it's kind of what we're working towards.
It's a direct contradiction of that line that we crossed out,
Mhm.
right? The current contract language.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I'm.
That, yeah, I know that's what you were getting at.
So the practical effect would be that going back to 4.1. The letter of offer would actually outline a barring cause as outlined, it would actually outline a term limited appointment of 3, 4, 5, or in some cases, 6 years or more, depending on the term contemplated in the letter of offer, combining 4.1 with 4.2, with 4.3, with 4.8 and 4.9. That's how I'm reading that. Yeah. Seeing that.
Yeah, obviously, we also have the language in there that the total financial package is, it may propose for the entire time, but the financial package itself may change over that time. It's not a locked in thing, but yeah, that is kind of the intent we're going for.
But that's a very different, not locking in the financial package versus us having to demonstrate adverse financial conditions are not the same standards.
That's true, but adverse financial constraints are just one of the reasons that we have listed for non-renewal.
But it's the only financial one contemplated.
It is the financial one contemplated, yes.
So in your proposal, what would be the way in which the financial package contemplated in the letter of offer would not be binding? But for us proving adverse financial conditions? I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, I hear what you said about there's a hypothetical situation. Help me understand what that hypothetical situation would be.
I'm saying that the department can propose to the individual, like, we expect this much money over this given time period.
Right.
And with the right to reappointment, that they are, guaranteed at least the stipend minimum, but the stipend could be changed to the minimum on subsequent years if they're given the department is not locked into keeping at that higher rate of pay. They can change that rate of pay if necessary for financial conditions. And they could always go through the process of saying we had bad financial conditions and we shouldn't have hired someone and said we were going to have them for 4 or 5 years. But we're hoping that going through this process and having this helps departments kind of plan, 3, 4, 5 years, if we know how many GAs we're hiring and how long we expect them to be here, and it helps GAs say, I can feel comfortable that as long as I'm doing the right thing and I am making, good decisions and I am making progress and my department does not, and the university doesn't face unforeseen circumstances, that I can do my best to get appointed each year.
So if I hired a GA at above the minimum,
Yeah,
as long as I renewed them, I could renew them in a subsequent year for the minimum?
I don't think there's anything barring the University of Florida from doing that.
Okay.
And conversely, I mean, like, say you get a raise, right, either through the CBA or the department decides to give a raise, right, like. It wouldn't be like, oh, we're denying you this raise because your financial package, like, said.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
All right, other questions?
Just the relationship between the letter of appointment, the letter of offer. If someone has a letter of offer for 4 years and it isn't appointed in a 5th year, that's explicitly not considered non-reappointment, right? Sorry, that's a lot of
Yeah.
negatives. Okay. Or, just trying to figure out, is it even or odd? Negatives.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then I have to head out, but I do want to be here for 4, so.
Okay. Which one would you like to do next?
Which one do you guys like to do?
8, 9, 16.
Yeah. At least that.
You want this copy? You can see it quick.
Sure. I haven't given them all of them, so those are all of the printed copies for the other 3 meetings. Okay.
Thank you, Austin.
Thanks.
Bye, Austin.
How many do you need?
I need
One more.
just 4. This is, I got,
Oh.
that's,
Oh, yeah.
Could you pass 2 to us? If there are some. Thank you.
Oh, that's one.
Okay, we can share.
That's fine, yeah.
Myself.
Not too complicated, this one.
No, it's not too complicated, this one. Thank you.
Yeah. Did we say 16?
You said
Yes.
16.
Are you presenting with me? Should I take the note?
Oh, 16 is pretty easy. We haven't made any changes. Obviously, we want to keep our RTs and we rounded very minimally the FTE that we would get, so that the RTs that we do have get 0.5 FTE, which we all want to see as the standard. And as previous counters that we've offered you, we have made concessions on the office space point for the parking, and left the language that of as soon as practicable for 16.7. So that's our counter.
can we talk about 16.6 for a second?
16.6.
Which is the notification of office locations.
Mhm.
Would you be amenable to trying to wrap that up into a single omnibus comprehensive report, so we don't have to produce multiple reports?
What would that mean?
So, because you guys have the other provision that talks about wanting the other information, what I'm saying is instead of having to give you guys multiple reports, even if we had to give them to you more frequently, we would rather probably just have one exchange of information, even if there's pieces of information you don't need in one report, but they are requested in a different report, I guess is what I'm saying. Because you also get, like, after the implementation of raises, you guys get a report, and then you also get a report for the purposes of the certification report. And then, I guess what I'm saying is I'd rather try to get all of the data, like the comprehensive list of everything,
Mhm.
because I've already kind of been working with IT about creating that, like, the comprehensive data transmit. Because it has to come out of multiple databases, and once they can set up the script to write it,
Yeah.
and then be like, can we just run that report on a quarterly basis or even a monthly basis? So that I can then just give it to you, and we don't have to do what we do now, which is manually pull it out all the different places, I guess is what I'm saying.
So you wanna create a separate article with all of the reports and stuff like that?
I'm just saying if we could add the known office locations into the other section, which talks about the reports that we give you, as opposed to having it be its own report, is all I'm saying.
Oh, I'm sorry, I've been out of the loop a little bit, which is the section where you?
So-
16.6.
Right, but
No,
there's
but he said he
Yeah,
wants to move
what
it
other
somewhere
part?
else. where-
Oh,
yeah, it talks about it in,
This is the first time this is coming. Sorry. Okay. Just so you know.
it's in 19.7.
You guys have a copy of the CD?
I don't have a
online.
paper.
Yeah, the
That's not-
university shall provide a report containing the following information no later than the third week of semester, practicable, name, class, title, hiring academic department, pay rate, FTE, email address, campus mail address, union dues deduction status, which obviously we can't do anymore, so we don't collect that anymore. But what I'm saying is 19.7 already contemplates that they're supposed to give you the campus mailing address.
Mhm.
I guess it's possible that their campus mailing address could be different than their office location, but it
Yeah.
would seem like that would be an opportunity for us to probably bring two very similar provisions together without requiring them to be in different places. That's all I'm asking.
So you would want to move that to, what is it, 19.7?
19.7.
19.7.
I don't foresee an issue with that, but we can chat about it next
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Their office locations? Well, I mean, I've been giving them the department locations. I mean, I did a VLOOKUP. I mean, I ran all the department codes with the department code locations, because I had to do, it was a cascading VLOOKUP. So I pulled their, like, department code. It ran to the department address, and then I inserted the department address in the thing, and then that's what
That may be the best you could get, like, from a team's faculty standpoint. I've never seen anything with such a precise location, because offices change, we don't have
Like a room number or something, yeah.
I've never seen that.
I mean, a building would be better than nothing at all, right?
Yes, but I mean, GAs do tend to have key access. Like
Yes.
keys,
Yeah.
which it does mean that it gets put into,
That's like at a
Someone.
local level, not a centralized
Right.
depository.
should it not be centralized?
Yeah.
I don't even.
Well, I think that, so a lot of departments, for example, like for talking, going mailing address, right? Like a lot of places, you don't have mail delivered to your office, you have the mail delivered to the department, and then you have like a place where you go and
Yeah.
basically pick it up out of your box.
Right.
And it may have your office number on your box, but normally they don't distribute mail like on a little cart, like going down the hall, like
Mhm.
normally. So I guess that's the big difference between the mailing address and the office location.
Mhm.
You know, is that a substantive enough difference, or can we just give the centralized, like the department office, the main department office?
I see. We'll have to talk about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's not me trying to be difficult, I just don't think if anyone's ever taken that.
I mean, I can see what you're saying, that there would be, there would not be a centralized location where all that information is stored. There would be definitely at a departmental level, some not, if GAs are being assigned offices, there
Sure.
would be.
I just think in a lot of places, it may be in like a key binder where they have all the key pockets. rather than they-
For me, like in the biology department, I'm sure it would be the guys in the stock room who would,
Yeah, they're like,
Yeah.
oh, Sikander's in room 0123.
right,
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And but that's not necessarily translated to a database that's shared with you at our HR Central, so we could pull it. Like, we'd have to like call whoever
Create.
creating that binder and be like, okay, go type all these in, and then like, and it
Mhm.
changes on a semester by semester basis. too,
Sure,
So.
yeah.
I'd rather get you timely information that would be useful as opposed to never getting you the information that we're not gonna be able to capture, I guess is
Mhm.
the main.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about it,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. I don't think we have any other questions about 16.
Okay,
Thanks.
what's next?
8 or 9.
Next year is 8.
8 it is.
Did you guys do the two versions or is this just one?
Just one.
Okay. So I know Gates had a lot of, oh, you must have just accepted them all. 'Cause the whole page looks black. You must have cleaned it up. It was even in that.
It still has some colors.
It's more at the end
Yeah.
that it gets kind of intense.
All right.
So I think that for this, the substantive changes are in 8.3B.
Okay,
When we say. Oh, such verification shall not be used as a basis for initial approval of paid leave. This verification shall be provided by a GA within 22 days of request. Or as soon as practicable, which is in accordance to what you told us that, the leave team is already doing. We just wanted to like have it in the contract so that GAs know how it works, and are readily informed about what the process might look like. We have accepted the removal of like the next sentence, saying however, because access to mental health, services is limited by long wait lists for accessible providers, medical verification for healthcare provider cannot be required, so on and so forth. Since you have told us that this verification can come from any healthcare provider, so, you know, if they need to go to the UF Student Health Center, that they can do so, for mental health reasons as well. We have kept, what is it, 4 and 8 days of bereavement leave for domestic and international students. So we haven't made any more movement on that compared to our last offer. We think that 4 and 8 respectively are really necessary for bereavement. We don't think that 2 days and 5 days are, is it 5 days that you propose, that 5 days are enough? And we've, I don't know if there's like the proper indentation there, but we have, I don't know if it's the exact same wording. Yes, this, that says following a GA taken bereavement leave, they shall be entitled to paid extension of the leave in accordance with 8.3, so that GAs know that they can take bereavement leave and they can also, you know, if they are having, if this loss is so great that they need to take paid leave, that they can do so. You said for 8.5,
Can we pause for that for a
yes,
second?
we can.
So I think one of the questions I have about line 80, the way it's written, I don't know if this was the intent or not, are you actually trying to create a different type of leave?
No, we want GAs to know that they can take bereavement leave and it to deal with the affair of, you know, losing a family member.
Sure.
And if they need to not come back to work because it is a terrible loss and they can't function, they know that they can take that paid leave. And so the paid leave is what it wouldn't be the, I guess, I don't want to say that, yeah, you can.
Wait, so, I think maybe the confusion might be coming from that the previous sentence kind of says the same thing, right? Like, any additional leave beyond the limits described in this provision must be in accordance with 8.3 or 8.5.
Right.
And I think, so, I mean, that's kind of a negative way of saying, I think, the sentence that's been added now, which is that you can take additional paid leave in accordance with 8.3.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that precludes it. It actually is encouraged, like,
Right.
yeah, I think we want people to know, like, and they're allowed to, independently of whether or not they take bereavement leave, if they suffer a loss of a family member, or frankly, anyone, it doesn't matter who it is, in relation to them.
Right.
If they are suffering from a serious health condition as a result of dealing with that, they're welcome to apply for paid leave under 8.3. There's nothing that precludes them from doing that. And I guess
Right.
that's why I'm asking if this is like a different category, because.
I think it's a bit, it's like kind of a bit of repetition, but
Yeah.
it's more like in the way that it's phrased, like that is more of a negative comment where it's like, this doesn't prohibit you from taking paid leave, in it as in 8.3, and the way we've written it there is, that you are still entitled to
Gotcha,
that.
so
Yeah,
I think the key thing for us then is gonna be the phrase shall be entitled is difficult because all of the conditions for accessing 8.3 are not necessarily met by what's covered in 8.4. So I think, you know, I think we could probably get to a sentence that talks about how do they have an interaction with each other.
Mhm.
But the way I'm reading this, it sounds as if you bypass all the eligibility requirements and you automatically just get the paid extension. That's the way it reads to me.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that that's not the intention, because they should still have to meet all the requirements contemplated in 8.3, which would mean certification probably of a mental health condition.
With the timeline
with the
specified,
timeline
yes.
specified and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah, that is our intention.
All right, thank you.
So we're happy to hear your legalese on that.
Sure. There's just a big difference between if I'm guaranteed to automatically get the entire paid leave because I first took bereavement is different than I'm allowed to apply for the leave under 8.3 at any time. There's nothing that says I can't do it during a particular time other than the eligibility requirements that I'm completed. All right,
Mhm.
thank you.
What else? So for unpaid leave, you said you weren't interested in maintaining a website, like a link, so that you would prefer to have it as an appendix.
Sure.
So we've made that change.
Okay.
Says appendix X. I don't know
Just as a
what.
placeholder.
Yeah. So maybe there's like anything.
Don't we already have an appendix X with the,
I don't
with the
care,
healthcare?
I think that's like maybe appendix.
but it's not the
L.
unpaid leave request thing, the form. There's,
That's
Oh.
F.
Okay, yeah.
Healthcare is currently appendix F.
Okay.
Mm. Oh, we changed this.
Where are you looking at?
Just, I'm not sure which changes are new and which ones are old.
In which line?
Just the 8.5,
Looks like blue might be new. That's an old blue change.
yeah, I feel like the new blue is darker. Or
You mean
purple.
new with respect to the previous, from our previous proposal?
Yeah. Um,
Comparing them, they look the same.
Yeah, I think they might just be the same.
okay, not sure, I think that was pretty much, like, the two things that I mentioned were what Austin and I were talking about during our bargaining meeting.
And we're not trying to pull a fast one on you.
No, I guess.
Wow, the first proposal for this was a year and a month ago.
We've been at this one a while. They request an unpaid leave by completing the requisite leave request form. And down in appendix X. That was the change. Such request. We made this rose practical home and
The purple is the latest change, they're different color there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Purple and the.
It's purple on the print, okay. But there's also, like, this looks purple to me and this looks lighter blue, but this lighter blue is like Patrick from a different time.
They're different color there than they are here, so.
So I
So
think
that-
there's a minor change, where we took out is maintained and updated at, and instead put can be found in.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
That's a very minor change, and I think the rest of it looks pretty much the same.
Yeah, it looks great.
yeah,
Mm,
Let me ask you a different question though. So I know that we've gone back and forth on this. I don't think we've had a lot of conversation about it, but. So when we say serious health condition, what is the need to have it be augmented by the phrase physical or mental.
We just wanna make sure that mental is covered, like. If somebody is suffering through the loss of a loved one, and
Sure.
that is. Probably not hurting them physically, it is hurting them mentally.
Yeah, I don't disagree with
Yeah.
that in the least. I guess the thing that's really important for us, though, again, talking in 8.3, is that. We don't wanna be we wanna get as far away from making that determination as possible. We want the person who's signing the paperwork, who's giving the certification. Is we really don't care if you have some sort of medical provider, a healthcare provider that says this person has a serious health condition. I don't think we really care if it's one or the other. Like, I'm just, the phrase, I'm just,
So what is the problem of including physical or mental?
I think it's redundant.
Isn't it okay to like have redundancy? Especially
The more
because like,
explicit it is, the
yeah.
better, yeah.
cause
Unless there's like a third one that we're missing out
Yeah.
there, yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
I don't
What
know
would that be?
the metaphysical health condition.
Right,
No, I
yeah.
don't know.
Just asking.
Yeah,
I've just never seen it, I've obviously I've learned a lot of provisions about
Mhm.
this, and I've never seen it be called out in that way, and I'm just wondering what it adds to I'm just wondering what it adds to the provision.
yeah, I mean, if somebody comes along with like a different reading of what a health condition is.
Right. And I think in general, mental health is kind of a neglected thing in the
Yeah.
sense of like, people don't think of it in the same way as a health condition.
I
That
just
as
don't
like
want
breaking
people
your
to-
leg. Or
Yeah,
something
I just
like
don't think that, I just don't want people to think that we have in the past previously denied people who applied for.
Yeah, no, we're,
Because, I mean, I don't know what the
Mhm.
statistics are,
Right.
Yeah.
but we see a lot of people who apply for paid
Mhm.
leave due to mental health conditions. Not necessarily, I mean, there's people that do both, but this is not something that we like deny.
yeah,
So like, in your case, you have a broken leg, it's okay, you're suffering from something, and we say no.
Mhm.
Like,
yeah, well, I mean, for the record, people assume in
Mhm.
the recording, we're not adding that because
I
of
got
a
it.
history.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
fair enough. I appreciate that. Any other questions on 8?
I have a question about line 50 for 22 days. That seems very like a random number to me.
Line fifth,
So that was the number I got from Jessica.
Yeah.
Oh, that's our.
Yeah, that's our number, sorry.
Got it.
Can I ask a quick question as
Sure.
follow-up? So I'm sorry, I missed last week. Did we ever hear back about the validity of an international, like, doctor's note?
oh, yeah.
I know you responded with the timeline, but that was a follow-up question that we had that, God forbid someone goes
Yeah.
internationally to
Let me-
deal
let
with
me go
the.
back and I'll go back and check my email from the leave team. I mean, it doesn't specifically say that it has to be a domestic healthcare provider,
Right,
so, I mean. I
Has
don't
to
know
be a
what the
treating
reality of that would
physician,
be.
right?
I don't know what yeah,
I mean, yes.
Yes,
It needs to be
like,
the
yes.
treating- So if they're being treated by, because they're physically located internationally, or if they're coming from the care of a family member that's located internationally,
Mhm.
I don't see why that would be a.
Yeah, because it doesn't say like AMA certified, like it
Right.
doesn't
Yeah.
have a specific certifying body, and it also doesn't describe a geographic location. I mean, pragmatically speaking, I don't think we're equipped to do gumshoe, detective work on people. If someone represents themselves as being a medical professional from Germany or
Mhm.
from,
yeah, wherever.
I mean, I don't think we have any
Okay.
reason to say, well, you don't check these boxes, so on and so forth.
That's good. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure there was no
Yeah.
like exclusion for that. No.
Anything else on 8? You got any questions on that? No, good?
Thank you. 9.
Very much.
Well,
9?
okay, so I think the changes here in the physical copy are in purple.
Okay, and it,
and weird green. Okay, so we made, I remember you from last session saying that you were having an issue with, I think lines 18, 19, 20, about when acting as an individual,
Yeah,
a GA, GAs are expressly not acting in their capacity as a UF employee and therefore only obligated to adhere to policies and laws that are applicable beyond the provisions of this contract. That you were having an issue with that because it was already stated, or in your point of view, it was already stated in 9.1. We disagree with that because our reading of 9.1 is about GAs as employees when behaving as an employee of University of Florida.
right.
But we also want to make it clear that GAs can behave as individuals when they're not acting as employees of University of Florida. And so those are, to us, very different.
Yeah, I understand the sentiment. I guess one of the questions that I had put forth is what is the test before doing it, before engaging in a particular behavior, the GA just says out loud, I'm doing this as an individual, and then engages in a behavior? Like what is the legal test that we are going to employ?
Were they working while they were doing it? Like if I'm in class, I'm expressly working.
Okay.
If I'm in the
Unless
lab,
you're there as
I'm
a student.
working.
Unless you're there as a student.
Uh,
You're not working in a class that you're a student.
if I'm teaching the
Yeah, if
class,
you're a teacher.
if I'm teaching the class, I'm a TA or an instructor of record. If I'm a student in a class, I'm not a GA.
I mean, this also, not to continually bring up workload and this separation between employee and academic, but this again brings up the gray area between if you're an RA, when are you an RA for your 20 hours a week versus the other 20 hours that you work,
Mhm.
where you're a student? It's a great question that we've been trying to solve, that you all have said you're not interested in.
I think, so one change I see here is that you put in, or we put in, the words during working hours.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so that's the way if I was saying to make that clear, that 9.1 is about working hours. And then this, sentence in 9.2, I guess, is also being explicit about the fact that, yeah, when you're outside of working hours, when you're not a GA,
Mhm.
you're not acting as a UF employee.
Yeah. So we just want to make sure that our freedom to speak and behave, and maybe engage in research as part of our dissertation, is not, you know, what's the word?
It doesn't come under the
Constricted, yeah.
CBA, like just straightforward, right? I mean, CBA is about our work and it's not about, doesn't concern the CBA if it doesn't, if it's not about what we're doing at work.
Mm.
All right.
And then I think the other change was in the last point in, oh God, this numbering is all wrong. 96, 9.6 question mark?
The second 9.5.
Yes, the last one, B, two B. Because we were having a discussion about,
The choreography or
there were,
The written.
so both of them are us trying to make a point, but the crossed out one is our previous wording and the new one is on the bottom.
Okay.
we don't want the university to create regulations that may constrict what our research and the research avenues that we may pursue, as long as these, you know, are following what our advisors are sort of guiding us through, and that it follows our field's ethical standards. Because we view that as a way to protect our academic freedom as well.
It's interesting that you use the word ethical standards because you were very specifically against us including that
Mhm.
previously. And we agreed to remove it. Here's what I would say about this particular thing, and I think we're coming at this particular topic from different perspectives. I think if I were to put it simply, I don't think the university is ready to, almost through like the transitive property, give the same level of academic freedom to our GAs that we give to our faculty, because those faculty are responsible for supervising and providing coaching, guidance, assistance, lab space, and helping you all through your academic work. The level of freedom you have in the pursuit of your academic work doesn't fall under the CBA, but we're not gonna be giving the same level of, it's ultimately the faculty member who's overseeing your work, who's responsible for meeting all those, you know. We're not gonna get into a situation with a GA where the GA says, look, I have a right to do this. And the PI says, well, no, you don't. And then you say, no, yes, I do. And that's what I'm gonna do, even though my supervisor is telling me not to. Like, that's just not something we're gonna be able to agree to. It just isn't.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. Do you mind clarifying just like that example that you're trying to give again?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're working in a lab
Right,
and you've worked out what your research is, you know, you conduct research protocol X, okay? And you say, oh, look, I want to change this and modify it because I'm interested in actually using a different set of samples, or I'm interested in changing the process, or I'm interested in creating the procedure because I think this might be better. And you have a discussion with your supervisor, and supervisor says, no, I want you to run protocol X with the samples I told you and the way that I told you to do it. And you say, well, no, you can't tell me to do that. I have a right to pursue this other line of inquiry.
But that's not what B says,
So how am I misinterpreting it or misunderstanding it?
because B is about the university. It's not, my PI cannot guide
I
my
got
work.
it. Okay, so here's the thing. You only have one employer. Like, you only have one point of employment contact. Like, the agreement that we have with you all as employees is only going to recognize the university as one ultimate body that delegates throughout its different structures. But we're not gonna have a different agreement between the way that you interact with your PI differently than you would interact with, say, UFHR or the dean or the president, or like, we're not gonna be constrained in terms of how we can delegate our authority internally based on what we have in the CBA. Like, that's not, now I understand kind of what you're saying.
But
Like, you feel like, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, let me just finish my statement. Like, you seem comfortable with the PI, but you don't want the university deciding a regulation settling for all faculty, is what I see you nodding. I gotcha. So that's, I think, where the disconnect is. Go ahead, Eva, I didn't mean to cut you off.
we do have provisions that are specific about like meeting with the president, for instance. So like, I don't understand how that.
And it's actually pretty consistent with the way we rebuff that, because what we've said is, we are not going to bargain away or permissively bargain anything that describes where and in which way our delegate authority is gonna fall within our internal structure. Like, we're gonna be the ones that maintain the ability to say, in this case, this decision is gonna be made by the director of employee relations, whereas in this case, this decision is gonna be made by your supervisor, or this is gonna be decided by the provost. I mean, sometimes there's individual administrators' names who may appear, but all of them are ultimately delegated authority by the board and or the president.
But we still, like, in that article, we're still talking to you, if not the president. We're
Right.
not talking to our PI to like
Sure.
talk about these things.
No, you're 100% right. Because that's the way we've decided to approach it.
So Patrick, can I ask you, I mean, in this article, right, it says that the university will not create regulations that inhibit.
Mhm.
And, I mean, our PIs cannot just like unilaterally create a university regulation.
Right, that's
So
true.
in this case, I think university is not like, you know, the university has delegated the authority to the PI to,
It's true.
you know, be, it's. In this case, it does mean the university.
That's true, but to, my secondary objection was actually that phrase will not create regulations. I mean, I think we've done a lot of good work in describing the interaction of the CBA and future regulations. I don't think we're gonna be able to agree to a provision that specifically constrains any regulation creation of any kind, quite frankly. Because we're not gonna have the regulatory power of the bot sit underneath the CBA. We can talk about the impact of the regulations, which is what we try to do with you extensively, and talk about, you know, if the bot were to make a regulation that has an impact on the CBA or affects terms, wages, conditions of employment, we would immediately come to the table and discuss it with you, so on and so forth. You know, there was some phrasing about, you know, pending legal action, you know, we did a lot of that. But in terms of an explicit statement that says the university will not create a regulation that thus and so, we're gonna have a really hard time agreeing to a provision that explicitly denies the university the ability to create a particular regulation.
So how would you rephrase that? Like, to agree more in terms of what you just said?
Well, again, I'm not so sure that you have unfettered academic freedom in your research. I think you're better protected on the academic side of the house, which we don't want contemplated in the CBA, than the work that you're assigned to do as part of being a GA. The only,
So Patrick, is this like the official position of the university that we are not entitled to academic freedom in the same?
no, I'm saying you're not, it's different. I'm not saying you're not entitled to any academic freedom. I said, I think you're entitled to different academic freedom. I don't think unless, if you're not in charge of your lab,
Mhm.
like, for the purposes of your work, keep in mind, I mean, it's
Yeah, yeah.
important that we distinguish, right?
Right,
If you had let me give you a different hypothetical example. Let's say that you were hired as a GA and you had an RA appointment. And let's say you significantly modified your personal research to where it no longer aligned with the work going on in a particular lab. And I'm speaking vaguely because, as I've told you before, I'm not an expert on research protocols. I'm not a researcher. I've never worked in a lab. If your focus shifted in such a way that you are no longer within the constraints of a particular PI's lab, that it no longer made sense for that PI to work with you, I don't think we would want to be in a position whereby the GA could assert to the PI, no, I can do this because this is what I want to pursue.
where in this proposal where does that, you know, hypothetical situation, what language in this proposal speaks to that?
I'm not talking about the specific, I'm talking about I'm talking in a general sense of how the academic freedom is different.
So,
For
I
the
mean,
purposes of
practically,
work.
how would that, I mean, how would this hypothetical fit into like contract language here?
What I'm saying is that's why I think it's difficult to have on the research, because I think we've had a lot of good language that we can agree to, but on the specific point about self-determining like research pursuit in the context of employment, I think it's problematic.
But where
Because
have we said that? Have we said that?
I think that's what we've been circling around in the previous B and in this B. Will not hinder in their
Well, yeah.
endeavor to explore all avenues of scholarship, research, and creative expression.
Right. So, I mean, that's not about, hey, if your PI says, I mean, nowhere in this article have we said, oh, if your PI tells you to do something, you're still allowed to do whatever, because of academic.
But wouldn't that be constraining it and hindering it? If
Not
your
through
PI
regulation. That's like, you know, my boss is telling me to do something and I'm at work. Like you kind of gotta do.
Can
what
I
say,
maybe
yeah.
offer an example?
Sure.
I'm in sociology.
Yeah.
And so I'm under fire from all of this stuff.
Right, gotcha.
And when like whatever 366 came out, 366, right? Came out and they were like, you're not gonna be able to study critical race theory or intersectionality and they had that laundry list, right, of terms. If I was working as an RA, right, and we like studied one of those things, if the university created a regulation that said in following 366, which didn't get passed, right? But in following this, you can't study critical race theory and intersectionality and all of this stuff. that would be a university regulation that would infringe on my employment.
As an employee, it would
research.
infringe on your supervisor's rights, not yours. And that's, your supervisor would then be responsible there. As a
But,
student, if you weren't a GA, then maybe, you know, I want to write this paper, I want to work on this research project. That's one thing, but it's I think it's your supervisor, it's a faculty member who, as an employee, would have that academic freedom, be like, nope, sorry, I'm gonna push back, I'm gonna research this anyway, and then it's a faculty contract.
Right.
But as a GA, that's your supervisor, they're the one, that's why I think where you're going, is this doesn't belong in the GA contract, it could be in the faculty contract. As an employee, in terms of the paid relationship.
And it is that some of that phrase, not the exact phrase, but very similar phrase to what you guys have there does appear in the faculty contract. Not, it doesn't contemplate regulations necessarily, but in your previous one that talked about exploring all avenues of scholarship, research, and creative expression, there's a phrase very similar to that in the faculty contract.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we were doing like research like that
Mhm.
under our supervisors, like, you know,
Yeah. Which you
supervision,
certainly
right?
could be.
Right,
Yeah, which,
yeah.
then
and
you would
actually
be
you're
inviting
right.
trouble onto yourself, right? I mean, that is like
So-
what we're trying to
Yeah,
avoid.
can I just ask that, so if you're saying that the GA would basically be kind of absolved of this, because ultimately it falls with the supervisor, what happens if the supervisor says, I'm not gonna follow the regulation,
Right.
and then the GA is still doing the research because the supervisor has
Because they're
decided to not do it?
Yeah.
But I'm being told to do it.
Yeah, I think we would have to look at that on a case by case basis. Like if you specifically if you have a faculty member who's specifically telling you to go against what the university regulations are, or violate a rule, an ethical standard, I mean, forgetting this particular example, but if there's ever a time that a GA is being explicitly instructed to violate a statute or a policy or a regulation, the GA is aware of it. I would hope they would attempt to have that conversation with the supervisor, said, I'm not so sure about this, and if they don't feel comfortable, contact their HR rep or go to the grad coordinator.
But I think this falls back into what we've been trying to say with workload stuff, where that's a big ask of somebody, especially someone who's in a vulnerable position, right? We're talking about power relationships. We're talking about like, I'm gonna go to HR against my supervisor, who could also be my advisor, who like, we're opening ourselves up to a lot of like really big things.
But I think this would open you up more if you had it in your contract, and then you would be responsible.
But this would
No.
absolve us from the policies in the same way that the PI would be absolved from the policies.
Well, the PI is not gonna be absolved from the policies. The PI is gonna have an ability to make to push back and complain and attempt to do it. That's different than them being held harmless. Those are not the same.
You said that they could continue doing it.
No, we said they could have the argument. They could,
Okay.
if they try to do something that's directly in conflict with a regulation or a standard or something they've been told to do, I mean, they can cite Article 9, I think it is Article 9 in their contract.
And so
they-
this is
and they
my
can say,
academic
this is my
freedom."
academic freedom, you can't tell me I can't do it.
I also like don't inherently agree about your limitations on what counts as our work. If I'm an RA, I am still leading projects. I am still the first author as part of my work in the lab. So like, I want something that is going to protect me from university regulations that infringes on that work. Like, sure, the PI is guiding it, but that doesn't make it any less of my work.
No, I don't think it's any less of your work, but I think it comes down to, in a simple sense, whether or not the university, through the PI or some other delegated authority, has the ability to constrain and direct the work of our GAs. And I think the ability to direct the work of our GAs is gonna be something that we're not going to give up. And that includes what they
The
focus on.
PI is doing the guiding,
Right,
not university regulations.
right, but the PI is empowered to have that authority because it's been delegated to them.
But this article doesn't get rid of that power for the PI to guide their GAs.
So let's say, so in this hypothetical, we're really kind of going down the hole on this, but let's do it. So let's say that something happened suddenly to the PI and the PI quit, something terrible happened to them, they became incapacitated. They are no longer able to function as your supervisor. They're gone. Their replacement comes in and says, whoa. we're not doing this anymore. I don't like this. We're not gonna, I mean, now I have the authority to spend and reallocate the resources or to refocus the work. And we're gonna turn 180 degrees and we're gonna go focus on something else.
Mhm.
In addition to being unbelievably probably disheartening and disruptive to the GA who was probably working with that PI for all kinds of reasons. Unfortunately, in that situation, I think the university would have to defend its ability to say, no, that's the person who's coming in to replace them. And that's the person who has the right to do that because they are now the replacement.
Sure, but that
So-
article doesn't cover that hypothetical scenario.
Right, but I don't understand how it's any different.
Because we're talking about the university itself creating university-wide regulations about what topics can and cannot be researched.
I understand what you're saying. And I guess the best way I can say it is that the academic freedom that you all experience as employees is ultimately the academic freedom of your supervisors. Because you are acting under them. They are the ones that are actually officially being responsible for whatever the projects are that you are working on.
And I think you're trying to, that's kind of what you're getting at in the second half of that sentence, right? These research pursuits fall in line with the GA supervisor.
Yes.
Well, the advisory committee is an academic relationship. That's not.
Yeah, that's true, but it's supervisor, I'm assuming here, yeah, supervisor, right, yeah, I wouldn't have advisory committee. I mean, it is, I like that, but that's not a contract thing.
Yeah,
Supervisory
practically
can
speaking,
review
it's
it.
true, but from an employment standpoint, it doesn't belong there.
Well, then we can remove advisory committee from
Yeah,
there.
Isn't,
yeah. And that, yeah, because whenever I see a supervisor in a contract, I think that's the person you're reporting to in the
Mhm.
contract. That's not necessarily your committee chair for your dissertation. Most cases it is, but it's not
Mhm.
always the same.
can I just, this is CCL. In fulfilling assigned research duties, graduate assistants will be encouraged to exercise creativity and sound judgment in carrying out all, like, how are we squaring that there, based on this conversation that we're having, that we don't necessarily have the academic freedom in research, that it comes through our supervisor? How do you square that statement with the fact that CCL gives us academic freedom in research?
We have to read the last 7 words of that sentence.
Under the guidance of a research supervisor.
All right.
I mean, I think it's explicitly hemmed in by that phrase. I mean, I think it's a good point, Hannah, but ultimately that. I mean, that's what it's hemmed in by, under the guidance of the research supervisor. Yes, we want you to be absolutely exercise creativity, demonstrate sound judgment. You know, absolutely, but it's not independently. It is under the guidance of the research supervisor.
The last point B also fits that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it says pretty much the same thing in the last few. So.
Yeah, except that it almost, here's what, I'll say this a different way. It almost seems as if this provision is an attempt for GAU to fight the faculty's battle for them, is what it feels like.
We're fighting our own battles.
We're fighting our own battles.
We're facing the same issues.
And in teaching too. I mean, we were talking about research, so I brought up research, but I teach SYG 2000 Principles of Sociology, the class that got taken off of the core curriculum, the class that was talked about. Like, this concern about regulation and what we can and can't say and what all the reporting and all, like, this is very real.
So let's take that example, and let's say that if you reviewed the course materials with your supervisor, and your supervisor said, thumbs up, go for it, and you went into class and you executed that lesson plan and the curriculum that were approved by the department, and then it turns out that that was not appropriate, determined by the university or an external individual, BOG, whomever. I think the first thing that I would expect you to say is, well, wait a second, I run over this with my supervisor, and my supervisor gave me the thumbs up. That's what we would sort of expect you to say.
Or
And
is it, but isn't it still my academic freedom being constrained?
But I don't.
I am the one teaching it. I am the one doing the research.
You are doing the how, but I honestly believe, maybe we differ on opinion, you're not responsible for the what, you're responsible for the how. You guys are not in a position to determine the curriculum that is delivered by the university. That is as a whole. There's a whole structure in place, combination of administration and faculty that determine what the course offerings are. The individual content of those courses is determined. Now, you oftentimes will be responsible for designing courses. I know some of you have responsibilities for designing courses, but they meet curricula that are predetermined. You may be actually encouraged to design coursework, and then those designs are ultimately observed and looked at and critiqued and guided by a faculty member. There is not an unchecked course that you all would design that without any oversight would then go out into and be taught. That's just not the process.
But Patrick, PhD programs help create independent workers, which means that at some point in our career and as workers, we are determining the what as well. We might have guidance.
You will have influence on the what through the faculty senate process, through curriculum committees, but not ultimately independently determining it. There's a whole structure in place of which you'd be invited to be a part of in a more salient way once you get on the other side of your program. I agree. But it's not unchecked, it's not unfettered, and it's not 100% independent.
It's checked by the supervisor, which is in the article.
Who derives all of their authority from the organization, who empowers them to be in that position.
So, okay, let me ask you this. If if UFF were to present an article like this that says that in upholding academic freedom in research, the university will not create regulations that inhibit any in their endeavor to explore all avenues of scholarship. Yeah, without the supervisory, because obviously they are their own supervisors, right?
So,
Would you accept that?
so I'm not gonna engage in like a hypothetical bargaining scenario with other bargaining, but I'll make a statement, and this is my statement. And I said this earlier. The university is going to have a very hard time agreeing to any provision in any contract in which the CBA includes explicit language that says something that will constrain the ability of the university to write a particular regulation.
Sure, so your problem is with that, with saying that the university holds the right to create regulations that constrain the academic freedom of its workers. Your problem is not with us not doing the what because it's, I don't know what the wording that you use is.
But
Like,
it's
you
not
can
about the
just say that.
specifics.
You
It's
can
not-
just say that.
No, it's not, it's both. It's not about the specifics. We would be having a very similar, that the specifics of this happen to be academic freedom, but I think we're gonna struggle in any situation in which the university will not create regulations that, I mean, now, in this particular one, it seems as if, my impression is that the GAU position is that you are interested in sort of bisecting the authority of the university, and that you're okay with the individual the direct supervisor saying, hey, don't do that, that's not appropriate, we need to guide your work differently. But you would not be okay with the supervisor's supervisor or the supervisor's supervisor coming in and saying, hey, don't do that anymore, we don't want you doing that. It is, and again, that's just my impression, but it sounds like that's what I'm saying. It sounds as if you all trust the direct supervisor and maybe even the supervisor's supervisor, but not whoever represents the central authority of the university, whether it be the provost's office or UFHR or the Office of Research. There's some level at which it seems that you all are concerned at some level beyond the supervisor. You don't want that person to get involved. That's my impression of reading this.
I think
Yeah,
we can move
We've
on.
been over the
Yeah,
point
I have
over-
to leave at 3.
Okay.
So, do you have counters? Did they say?
We have 7.
yeah, thank you.
I do.
Ooh, look at that. Honestly, I think we should just.
I do.
Thank you.
These are the ones
Yeah.
on the
Unless
website.
you want your
No,
own.
no,
Have you sent it, Patrick?
It's, no,
Okay,
sorry.
that's okay.
I'll also send it to Austin. The Aaron Boss, I should send it to you. Eva, Hannah, Sikander, Austin.
That'd be great, yep.
I haven't opened, so I'm letting you send it next. Take a minute.
That's funny. Yeah. Wait, what were we talking about? Okay, yeah.
It's so funny.
Oh, they
Still
missed
nothing yet.
one.
I know.
So you do the client. Like everybody uses the web version.
Here's fine, I'm on Mac, so.
There it is.
Got it?
Yep.
Okay.
Is it just the one?
Just the one. But we'll definitely have 10 for you, as well as hopefully we'll have stuff, all of these for you on Monday. All right, so I don't have the previous one on here, so I believe that my changes are on the printed copy in blue. I don't know how they showed up on, it always changes the colors around, so. We are reasserting the average of. Again, it's what's currently in the contract. I don't want you to think we haven't heard your concern about the international. Limitations of some of the international programs, most of the international programs, but not all of them. But again, I think what we have not heard, what we haven't heard is two things on that point. One is why the CBA is the mechanism by which if there's a federal regulation that needs to be enforced, why if the CBA's responsibility to do that, and two, why then that same limitation has to apply to all GAs who are not similarly under that restriction. So I think you're gonna continue to see us reasserting the current contract language on that one.
So you're saying that the CBA should be able to have language which is in contradiction to federal
It's
regulations?
not in contradiction, it just doesn't speak to it.
I mean, it does implicitly, yes, because average means that some weeks you work more, some weeks you work less, right?
Except that if I were to work exactly the right number of hours, then the mathematical equivalency would be that I would also average that number of hours. It's perfectly permissible inside the contract. It
Yeah,
doesn't
but it's
say
not
you have to
permissible.
work more. It doesn't say you have to work more some weeks than others. It just says you have to average it. So
Yeah,
if I
but
work exactly 20 hours a week, when I get to the end of the semester, my average is gonna be 20 hours a week.
But that's what would happen if you removed an average of, right?
That's true. Okay, well, we did add a sentence, so maybe this will help some because we know that you all have been very focused on this. So look down at line 9, if you don't mind. So this is new language we wrote. For any employee who is legally prevented from working more than the average hours in a given week, the employee and supervisor shall work together to ensure that the employee's work schedule complies with any such requirements.
Okay.
So we're not like deaf to it, we just. Well, I mean, hopefully you understand the purpose of making what we added there. All right, in 7.2, we agreed to a bit of this sort of descriptive language. But the predetermination is just not gonna be something, the contemplation of academic course level and coursework again, we're gonna continue to not agree that that's gonna be included in the contract. So we did take, and I think this is all of your language that you had proposed, from lines 13 through line 16. Distinction, workload assigned to an employee in this article is separate from the time required for an employee's work for academic credit. This article should not be construed as imposing a limit on the amount of academic work necessary for an employee to make satisfactory academic progress toward the graduate degree. And we had previously proposed, and you had stricken, this time spent by an employee on their academic work is not part of this agreement. So we didn't reassert that part of it, which we had previously put in. The university and UFF, GAU agree that in practice, there may be considerable overlap between duties assigned as a graduate assistant and work required for academic credit. So, I mean, there's basically what you have in 7.2 is an acknowledgement. That's really what it is an acknowledgement. The predetermination of how many hours are going to be worked by person X or person Y in situation A or B is just not something that we're going to be able to agree to for manifold reasons, as we've attempted to explain before, including the varied abilities and experiences and capacities of the 4,200 employees we have that are covered by the bargaining unit. The other thing is too, is we had a lot of conversation about the fact that it would artificially inhibit someone who is interested in spending more time on their academic pursuit. Because of the way that you all have continued to sort of propose this.
How would it do that?
Because it talked about predetermining how many hours of X or Y, if you register for this, then any amount of time spent over X then is automatically considered overwork.
It's if you're being told to do that. It doesn't mean that, oh, if I decide to spend more, it's more if your supervisor is taking advantage of, oh, well, you also, this is kind of part of your dissertation, this is kind of part of your RA work. So, you know, come into the lab 50 hours a week. That's what it's supposed to address. It's not about, oh, if I decide and my advisor is not concerned with how much I'm working, it's, I've decided that I'm gonna work 30 hours on my dissertation.
Except the way that you wrote it is not being explicitly told. That's not the way that the language you proposed read. It didn't say if your supervisor explicitly tells you. That's.
Would you agree to that language?
I think you don't need it. I think if your supervisor is explicitly telling you to come into the lab 50 hours a week, if they explicitly tell you that, I think you've got a home run grievance. You don't need what you would propose in 7.2A.
The thing is, they're not gonna tell you come to the lab
Yeah.
for 50 hours. They're gonna tell you, you have to do this, this and this and this, and then you're spending 60 hours.
Yeah,
And then you tell them, I'm spending 60 hours on this work, and then they tell you, oh, but it's part of your dissertation, or like, it's, you know, you're gonna get a publication out of it, so you do it.
So to that point, we have proposed some new language in line 27. Which doesn't meet your proposal, but we do have there that we think may help. For employees assigned to research, employees may request to meet with their supervisor to ensure that work expectations, including estimated time to complete assigned tasks, are clear and understandable. Additionally, employees may request to meet with their supervisor to review time actually spent performing tasks and to request modifications if actual time is greater than the limits described in 7.1 above. So I know this is getting closer to something that you guys had said explicitly you didn't want, which was you did not want the grievance process being undermined by a parallel system, which we appreciate. But we felt like we also continue to hear that you want some level of additional consideration, protection, contemplation of, from your perception, how common this is. So this was our attempt to sort of thread that needle.
If I may, what we really want is a clear line. We want a definition. We want a description. We don't want a process, right? We have the grievance process. We want to know where the line is between I work 60 hours because that's what I need to do to progress, and I work 60 hours because it's excessive workload and I'm overwhelmed and I've talked to my supervisor, like whatever has happened, like it's aside from this process. We want to draw the line. That's what we really want.
I think that's fair, but I think it's a very complicated question to answer because some of it is actually determined by the GA themselves. Let me give you an example. let's say that I'm working in a lab, let's say I'm a research assistant. Let's say that when I started my project, when I started all my research, my intention was I wanted to go into higher education, eventually become a tenured full professor. Okay, let's say I get 3.5 years into my research and I wind up with an opportunity to join a startup company that is going to utilize some of the research that I've done. And let's say now my career trajectory completely changes and I don't really, all I have to do is finish my work. And they're not gonna, my new employer who's already talked to me doesn't care how much I publish anymore. At that point, my motivation for what I have to do between now and getting to the end is I just gotta get through it. And again, it's a hypothetical example, and as I said, I don't work in a lab, I'm not familiar with research protocols, but I do know that there are oftentimes people that start off with thinking they're gonna go one way and they wind up going a completely different way.
So if someone decides that their workload at some point is excessive, because that's what's happening, right?
Mhm.
Before the workload was not excessive to them, and
Right.
at some point
Now
now there's these other circumstances, and now it is excessive.
Mhm.
Why are we arbitrarily deciding that that's not okay, right? If they want to go in above and beyond, they don't have to grieve it, right? We're not saying if you
Sure.
work 60 hours, you have to
Right.
go through this process, right? And so if the point is that at some point, if you get overwhelmed and it is excessive to you, right? That you now have this line that you can point to and say, hey, there is this line and I now meet this threshold.
Mhm.
So I don't understand why that would even be an issue,
Mhm.
because you don't have to grieve it, right?
Right.
You don't have to. My wife works 60 hours a week, at least in lab, all the time. We're there 7 days a week, we're all night. Like,
What,
she doesn't grieve, like, she doesn't have to.
why, I mean, I also want to understand, why is this only for research employees?
I mean, it doesn't have to be, but we thought that that was the conversation we continued to have was about this overlap between research projects and having to, I mean, it just seemed like those were the examples that we kept sort of.
Oh, but it does happen in
more
teaching as
unclear.
well.
Mhm.
There are people can take teaching credits as well, and that can also be used as like
Okay.
in a similar fashion. That was why we did separate out into A and B for the previous one.
Gotcha.
You got it.
Well, I mean, in that case, then the first phrase before the comma in line 27 wouldn't necessarily be, you wouldn't necessarily be right. Just employees may request.
Yeah, and I mean, really, this kind, I mean, you put it in two relatively vague sentences. What we were trying to achieve with 7.3 is get a much clearer picture, right,
Mhm.
of, you gotta go. Yeah, no, okay. A much clearer picture of exactly what the duties are, right?
Yeah.
And so like, if we were to take a grievance, right, like, you could do a grievance. That there would be very clear understanding of what the duties are, how much hours you're supposed to spend on them. And on that basis, try to prosecute the grievance, not on these vague terms of averages and, you know, oh, just talk to your advisor and try to work it out. It should be clear. And to be honest, this is language that I've taken from the FSU GAU contract, like almost. So it's something that the FSU DOT does not.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I think you basically crossed out much more clear and explicit language in favor of vaguer language.
Lines 22 through 25 are from the FSU GA contract.
No, that is something that we have put, but the clarification of FTE and the,
Oh, lines 32.
mhm,
Okay.
sorry. Yeah, I think 7.3 is the main one that we took
Okay.
from FSU. Yeah.
I also have a grievance question, I think,
Sure.
which is. We've talked about proof, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering what happens when I go as a GA and I say, my supervisor told me to do X thing.
Mhm.
And then the supervisor says, I didn't say that thing, like who? Like, what happens if there's a, he said, she said, whatever sort of situation?
It typically depends on the nature of the case. So
Uh-huh.
if it's involving discipline or termination, then the burden of proof is typically on the employer. If it's about another contract compliance issue, then it's typically on the employee and the union.
So what
That's
would,
not us, that's not like a UF thing, that's like just typically the way, I mean, did I say that appropriately? Yeah,
what does like work, if there was an excessive workload case, like which category would that fall under?
so excessive workload would be, the burden is on the employee,
On the employee.
correct?
So if your supervisor says something differently and you can't prove, you don't have a recording of them, because why would you be recording them?
Right.
You're out of luck?
So this is a really good point, because I know we had this conversation probably 3 or 4 sessions ago, because I think you had kind of brought this up similarly.
Yeah.
And while I realize that there is an appropriately knee-jerk response to work first and then grieve, in a situation where you feel like you're being browbeaten and pressured to work more than you should,
Mhm.
and or you don't feel comfortable talking to, you know, someone else, you don't feel comfortable approaching the grad coordinator, a conversation with your supervisor haven't been helpful, you don't want to talk to the chair, you don't want to talk to, you know, whoever else your contact might be in the college. You know, if and when that supervisor were to try to discipline you for failing to meet their expectations, that's when the burden shifts.
So if you corroborate your story
Mhm.
with like, so if I'm talking to my supervisor, my PI, whatever, and they say something and I say something back and I hear red flags, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I hear alarm bells. And I go to my department chair or even just another professor in the department and I say, hey, this conversation happened and I want to tell you what was said.
Right.
Does that now we have 2 people versus 1 people? Or like, is it still because
Yeah.
they're here saying it through
Sure.
you?
It doesn't mean just because the burden is on you that you're wrong. It just means that you have the responsibility to demonstrate the veracity of what you're saying. You have to prove it beyond a reason. I mean, it has to be more likely than not. Basically, that would be the legal standards, more likely than not, if we're to come to a grievance, that's what occurred.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around, because if the suggestion, right, that you're inserting here is to talk to your supervisor. And what we're asking for is a clear line, right? This
Right.
doesn't even necessarily help with the grievance process. Because if I have a conversation and it comes down to, well, I had this conversation and then there's no proof from that even. Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
No, I get it. We didn't think you wanted to augment the grievance process. I think you guys pretty much said it
We're-
in those explicit terms.
yeah, we're not. I'm just saying, like, I'm just trying to point out that even this as this separate thing that we don't want, we want the definition, right? Even as this separate thing, this wouldn't help the grievance process. Right?
You don't
It's
think so?
not meant to, that's what the,
Yeah.
that's why they wrote it like that.
Yeah, it-
No, I disagree. I think it actually could help you dramatically. If you had documentation that you were struggling and you had a conversation with your supervisor and you said, look, this was the meeting that we had to talk about this specific issue. As an interim step beforehand, I think that would create an opportunity for an extremely powerful piece of documentation or for hopefully to correct the problem. I mean, really, that's ultimately what we want is we
Avoid the grievance.
avoid the grievance altogether and solve the problem.
okay,
Do we have any further?
I don't think so, sorry.
Where are we at with 10? Is that on your side of the table?
Yep, 10, and I said that earlier, we'll have 10 on Monday. My goal is to have 4 back to you on Monday.
Mhm.
What did you guys bring today? Because I think
8 and 16.
when we started,
4,
I think
8,
when we
9,
started,
16.
I think the only ones we had were what we presented and 10. So
Mhm.
as I had said a couple weeks ago, I mean, my goal is everything that you guys have put across is to have a response back on Monday. That's our goal,
Okay.
is to bring everything back that we have. And now that we have 4, I feel like we're in a good spot to give you. I think we'll pretty much have it, because I don't think there's anything else on our side now except for 10 and what you guys have brought today.
What about like the regulation article and?
The 20s?
Yeah, 28, 24, 23.
I think
Where are we at with that?
we might have brought 23 and 24 a couple weeks ago, but I don't remember off the top of my head, so.
Feel like I was the last one to send those to send those.
When we reviewed the chart like a month and a half ago,
Yeah,
I mean, I think 23 and 24 are on our side, but we were waiting for a response on 28. And as far as I can see in the drive
28, we gave a proposal on 9/30,
on 28.
on 28, September 30th. we
Okay,
gave
I
a
wasn't here for
proposal.
that, and it's not in the drive. Okay. All right,
we'll go over it.
yeah, yeah.
And I've got the chart, I'll try to update the chart too. The
That'd be
last
cool.
one I'd given,
If you don't mind doing that,
you know, I'll try to put that together too.
thank you.
Alright, we will see you all Monday.
Will do.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, I'm gonna stop the recording.
There's quite a few people.